All right. Congratulations. You've all made it to the last speaker of the day. Give yourself a round of applause. I think it's worthy of it. So thank you, Tim, for that introduction, and appreciate you allowing me to be here today to talk about this important topic. Look, I know it's been a long day for everyone, so I'll try to keep this short. If I don't, I'm going to have to answer to a 10-year-old, my son Oliver. So let me tell you, recently I gave a speech celebrating the opening of a new transit line in Toronto. It was televised live, and my son Oliver watched me speaking on TV. I spoke for 2.5 minutes, okay, 2.5 minutes. So I came home, I said, Oliver, what did you think of my speech? Like, I was pretty proud, right? My son gets to see me on TV. It's pretty cool. He says, without missing a beat, Dada, you lost me. You spoke for 2 minutes too long. He's 10, like, seriously. So with Oliver in mind, I will do my best to keep this speech tight. I saw Seamus O'Regan, the former Labour Minister here. Seamus, thanks for coming. Anna Gainey, I know, is here in the room. Just wanted to give you a quick acknowledgement, and I see many other friends in the audience. It's nice to see you all. So when I was thinking about the theme of this conference, building an energy superpower, I realized something important. None of that happens without the people who build. None of that happens in Ottawa. None of that happens on paper. It happens on job sites, when skilled workers show up, build a project, get home safely at the end of the day. And I know up close what it means, what a life in the skilled trades means. I'm the son of a bricklayer. I grew up on job sites carrying bricks around with my dad. I did that before I was a lawyer. I did that before I decided to do this crazy thing. My dad, Franco, came to Canada from Italy with nothing but a dream that his family would have a better life. Canada gave my dad and our family the tools to make that dream a reality. Today, there are thousands of Canadians, young Canadians with dreams of their own, deciding to take a similar path as my dad. And I want them to know that the skilled trades offered something powerful, a good, stable, long-term career. And that opportunity is real. Let me hit you with some numbers. BuildForce, an organization that provides labor market info, says and projects the following. We have 1.6 million construction workers in Canada. 21% of that workforce is expected to retire by 2034. That's 270,000 workers that will retire in that period of time. Growth in that sector, which you all have been talking about for the last day, will require another 100,000 workers. And with heavy recruitment by colleges and by unions and investment by governments, industry is expected to be short over 100,000 workers by 2034. So that some people will see as a challenge. I see that as an opportunity. A few weeks ago, I was in Kelowna for the Iron Workers Conference. As I prepared for that visit, I found myself thinking about the role skilled workers play in building the infrastructure needed for Canada to become an energy superpower. And I was thinking about workers. A photograph came to mind. It was taken on September 20th, 1932. It is one of the most famous images of work ever taken. The photograph is called Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. It shows 11 iron workers sitting on a narrow steel beam 69 stories above Manhattan, eating their lunch. Many of those workers were immigrants, Italian, Irish, and others who came looking for opportunity, just like my dad did when he came to Canada. At that moment, the world was in deep recession. Was in a Great Depression. Banks collapsed, trade slowed, 1 in 4 workers lost their jobs. Part of what made that crisis worse was protectionism. Countries turned inwards, raising tariffs, shutting down trade. Instead of protecting economies, it prolonged the downturn and deepened the pain for workers. Many governments responded by cutting spending and pulling back. But some leaders made a different choice. Construction of what we know now as the Rockefeller Center began just as the Great Depression was taking hold. Even as the economy was collapsing, the project moved forward. More than 40,000 workers were employed during its construction. And at a time when unemployment was devastating families across the country, it created jobs, restored confidence, and sent a powerful signal. Even in uncertain times, the way forward is to build. And that lesson is just as true for Canada today. That photograph I talked about is credited to an unknown photographer. But one thing about that photograph is absolutely clear. Those were real workers, no harnesses, no guardrails, no hard hats. They relied on skill, training, and trust in each other. And that photograph reminds us of something important. Countries don't build themselves. Workers build them. Canada knows this lesson well. When this country has faced defining moments, we didn't retreat, we built. We built the Transcontinental Railway. We built the St. Lawrence Seaway. We built the CN Tower. We build big things. Each of those projects required vision and determination. And more importantly, they required skilled workers, people who showed up and built something bigger than themselves. Today, we are living through another moment of change. The global economy has shifted, supply chains are being redrawn, protectionism is rising again. We've seen this movie before. History tells us that when uncertainty spreads, the worst response is to pull back and hope the past returns. The right response is to invest, to build, and to make sure workers can do the job. As the Prime Minister has said, we can do more for ourselves than any country can ever take away. That is the choice Canada is making. Whether it's the Bay du Nord Agreement in Newfoundland, the expansion of the LNG facility at Kitimat, British Columbia, our agreement in principle with Alberta to accelerate the construction of major projects, small nuclear reactors, these are all things you've talked about today. Canada stands to benefit from these agreements in a significant way. These projects strengthen long-term demand for skilled workers, expand opportunity for young apprentices. Yes, our government is choosing to build, and to make sure nothing stands in the way of workers going where the work is. Budget 2025, which I'm pleased to say has now moved to the Senate, we expect it to pass, includes more than $115 billion worth of infrastructure investment over the next 5 years. That represents one of the largest infrastructure investments in Canadian history, building homes, delivering major projects, and modernizing the infrastructure that Canada needs to grow. We've also made further investments in the Union Training Innovation Program, $75 million over 3 years, that supports union training across the country. That will double the program and expand the number of people trained. Since 2017, UTIP has supported more than 174,000 participants, including 30,000 alone last year. And the energy sector remains central to Canada's economic prosperity and security. Major investments in generation, transmission, grid modernization will be needed to meet the rising demand from electrification. Need for data centers, electric vehicles, rail, heating, heavy industry, electrifying the north, all of our power needs are going to make our workers in demand. While most energy occupations today remain balanced, but the shortages already exist in key roles of heavy-duty mechanics, industrial technician, and surprisingly, welders. Just yesterday, I announced $24 million in partnership with the province of Quebec to support training in the red seal trades. This is a good time to be in the skilled trades in Canada, because skilled trades workers are the straight line between our ambition and all the things you guys have been talking about today. So let me leave you with one final thought, and it's from the history books. The first commercial oil well in North America was drilled not in Texas, but in Ontario in 1858. The visionary behind it was James Miller Williams, right here in Canada. Our history is full of innovators and builders. We invented basketball, we discovered insulin, and my favorite, the BlackBerry, the world's first smartphone. And we drilled the first commercial oil well in North America right here in Canada. Canada has the history, Canada has the mindset, we have the vision. And Canada has the government that is choosing to build. We want to make sure nothing stands in the way of our workers going where the work is. So like my dad, Canada has big goals. We choose to invest, we choose to build. And we're choosing to make sure skilled workers can do what they do best, safely, confidently, anywhere in the country. Because when workers succeed, Canada succeeds. And here's my message to Oliver. If you're watching, I hope this was short enough, because if it wasn't, I know what you're going to say, and trust me, he would be disappointed. So let's keep building together. Long live Canada, the true north, strong and free. Thank you to Canada 2020, to the volunteers, to Tim for inviting me today.
So that was incredible, and we can all just go home now. No, I'm just joking. I also like to say that, so I'm Tiara Folks, for those of you that don't know me. I'm from TC Energy, and I also like to say that TC Energy also probably has one of the First Nation building projects, and it's the Canada's Main Line. And I'm very, very, very proud of what we do by bringing energy across the country to probably to most people here, all your homes. So we've heard a lot today about capital markets, infrastructure, regulatory reform, MPO. But I think, and you hit the nail on the head with that, is that we can't do anything in this country, and it comes down to people, people, people. And I'm sure that was drilled in your head when you were a political staffer, because it was drilled into mine. But people build these systems and people operate these systems. And that's really what it comes down to. So I think it's really fitting that we end the day with a conversation about labor and skilled trades. When Tim called me a few weeks ago and he asked me to moderate this conversation on labor, I obviously said yes. I hung up the phone and I walked into my colleague's office and I said, I don't know anything about labor. And then I remembered in 2016, when I first came to Parliament Hill, I started my career in the then Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labor's office. And so, I just kind of went back in my head and figured out, okay, where are we going to go? What are we going to talk about? So let's get started. We heard a lot today about Canada's potential to be an energy superpower. But from where you sit, do we actually have the workforce to build the scale of projects that Capital Power was talking about, that ATCO is talking about? Yeah, do we have the skilled labor in Canada to do this?
We absolutely do. 1.6 million workers currently. But look, there's no doubt we have a wave of retirements coming. And that is really critical to the future of building anything in this country. It's important because it's going to keep costs down, right? So there's a number of things that we need to touch on. Recruitment, training, mobility, and apprenticeship. Those are the key factors to ensuring that we have a Canadian workforce that will actually build these projects. I want to touch on, importantly, apprentices, because any skilled trade, especially in the red sealed trades, requires hours to complete their training. And what we find from our analysis is that people are not completing their apprentices in large numbers. They're not completing their apprenticeships. So we have a problem. The number one reason, there's not enough work. There's not enough continuation. Of course, there are a certain number of percentages that will flake out because they don't like it, they don't like this particular trade. But one of the things that is exciting is around the infrastructure money that we are going to be investing will provide those apprenticeship opportunities in the skilled trades.
My brother was one of the people that stopped working because there wasn't enough work, and so I keep reminding him that he needs to go back. So one issue that we're seeing is that industry raises quite often is labor mobility. So skilled workers being able to move between provinces when major projects ramp up. We see it a lot from Newfoundland. Skilled workers leave Newfoundland, they go to Alberta. Sorry, I'm just looking at Seamus. But it happens across the country. Is this an area where the federal government sees room for improvement?
Yeah, thanks. So I think the dream state is that you're qualified in one province and you work anywhere else in the country. That's the dream state, but it's complicated. It's a provincial responsibility. We have eliminated all federal barriers to labor mobility with our One Canadian Economy Act that was passed in June, but a number of barriers still exist. A number of provinces have taken really important steps. Ontario has a right to work piece where a skilled worker can come to Ontario, and while credentials are being validated, they are allowed to work. Other provinces are following and doing very similar important moves. We're focused on health and safety. I like to say whether you're in Newfoundland or in Victoria, gravity hits you in the same way if you fall. So why is it that you need 13 different working from heights training? Federal and provincial ministers were meeting in April. I think we'll have some good news to share. One of the first challenges that the MPO gave us was show the country that you can harmonize one health and safety regulation. I think we've already done the easy stuff, first aid kits, some PPE, but we will be moving to show the country that we can do bigger things. So look, like, it's real for workers. There's a member of the UA, his name is Mike. Mike moved from Alberta to Ontario. I was visiting him at a training center, and I said, Mike, how you doing? He's like, I'm good. I'm like, you seem to, he was sort of teaching the other students. I said, like, you seem to know what you're doing. He's like, yeah, well, I did all this training. I'm like, what do you mean you did all this training? He goes, well, when I was in Alberta, I did all of this training. And I said, so why you haven't do it again? He's like, well, Ontario doesn't recognize it. So, and I said, so the training, is it different? Is it the same? He's like, no, exact same training. Provincial logos are different. So, look, we can absolutely do this. Everyone is committed. This is a priority. The Prime Minister has raised this at the First Minister's meeting. Provincial premiers are engaged. So hope to share good news with you in April.
That's fantastic, and there's momentum behind here. So, cognizant of time, but First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, they're not just they're not just the skilled workers anymore, but they're partners and owners in major energy projects. So we've heard it all day. How important is workforce development to ensuring those projects deliver long-term economic opportunity into those communities?
Yeah, it's a really important conversation because remember, we have this challenge, right? A gap of 100,000 construction workers. So we have two groups of people that we are making progress, but women and Indigenous Canadians. I think we'll be touching on women in a minute. But for Indigenous peoples, we want them to share in the benefits of these projects. And that also means the opportunity to build these projects, should they wish. We are investing in building the connection in partnerships with Indigenous peoples, but there's some challenges. The challenges are remoteness of communities. So when you think about the remoteness of communities, there's not a training center, there's not a union training center there where you can go and be a member of the IBEW or a member of the Carpenters or a member of Leona. You can't, there's no training centers there. There's no colleges. When you think of the territories, there's real challenges with, having 5,000 workers go up and build a road, right? So that means that Indigenous peoples will have to travel from where they are, attend a college. That means money. That means a different culture. They're out of their support networks. They're away from elders. So there's real challenges there. Some unions are being innovative. Many of the unions have what they call mobile training centers where they go onto reserves or they go into remote communities where they do training. But look, there's a lot of work to do. Less than 5% of skilled trade workers are Indigenous. So it's absolutely a priority for us. And we're working with provinces and territories to improve this situation.
That's fantastic. And we didn't hear from Nico Eagle today, but I know that in Nunavut, they sponsor the breakfast program in schools just to help with people showing up to work. So I think there's a lot that industry is doing. So I'm very cognizant of time. We're at the end of a very full day of energy policy discussion, which means we've probably generated enough ideas today to power several more panels, Tim. But one thing we hear more and more, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly, is that Canada has become a country that talks about big projects more than we actually built them. So from a Labour perspective, what would it take to change that narrative?
So you won't be surprised for me to reject the premise of the question. We see big projects taking place all across the country right now. Ontario just finished a major refurbishment on time and on budget. We can look across the country of other major projects. I know many company representatives here have projects that have been completed on time and on budget. In order to ensure that we continue with that tradition, in addition to some of the things I talked about, apprenticeship, investment in training, one thing that is critical is predictability. And when you think about the scope of things that we have talked about, that you have talked about today, and the investments that are going to be taking place from a provincial level, from a federal level, and by private companies, that becomes a very challenging situation. If you put yourself in the Ontario Building Trades Council, it's very challenging for them to plan. So predictability and having a central workforce planning table where we can put some light in terms of planning these projects, planning on how this is going forward, is going to be critical. And you would have seen that Minister Hajdu announced workforce tables recently. There will be one on construction, one on mining, one on energy. I think that's an important first step to doing that.
Fantastic. Very cognizant of time. So I want to thank you guys all for attending this. I think this was fantastic. Everything you brought up, I think, is just hitting the nail on the head. And let's solve the workforce problem.
Thank you very much.